The reference range is simply the average of the population, and that helps you understand why that reference range gets lower and lower and lower every year, and men are being told by their doctor, oh, well, you're in this reference range, so you're okay. Excuse my language, I got to call bullshit here. You're not okay. You're just falling into this average range. It's like they keep lowering the bar and lowering the bar. Oh, you're good. You look fine. When in fact, you're not.
Are you unknowingly sabotaging your own vitality? In this episode, we unravel the mysteries of testosterone with Dr. Tracy Gapin, a leading expert in men's health. Discover why testosterone is the latest buzz, the surprising signs of low T levels beyond just libido, and how modern lifestyles might be impacting your hormones. Dr. Gapin will also share cutting-edge biohacks and future innovations that could redefine your health journey. So get ready to discover how understanding testosterone can empower you to reclaim your energy and optimize your health. Please note the content on Hack to Health is for informational purposes only and not medical advice. Consult a health provider for medical concerns. Opinions expressed are those of the guest and may not reflect my views or those of the podcast. Hey, Dr. Tracy, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today.
For sure. Glad to be with you today.
Starting basic, we talked a little offline. For people that, they know the term testosterone, but they don't know exactly what it is, in 300, 700, what your count should be. Yeah. Like, basic question, like, what is testosterone? Sort of how does it affect us? And sure. Why is everyone talking about it right now?
Great starting point. So testosterone is simply a hormone. It's a steroid hormone that is important for both men and women, although it tends to get all the attention when it comes to men. It's a hormone that's critically important when it comes to normal male function, especially things like cognitive function, like memory and mental acuity and focus, concentration. It's important for mood. It's important for energy and our sense of well-being, sense of being a man, and confidence and drive. A lot of guys will notice later in the afternoon, they get tired, they're fatigued, they want to take a nap, they're having brain fog, and they can't focus. All that can potentially be related to testosterone. Testosterone is important for metabolism and the ability to burn fat and build skeletal muscle. And it's intimately tied to cardiovascular health, which is important. The number one cause of death in men and women is cardiovascular disease. And we know that without question, men who have low testosterone have a dramatically increased risk of cardiovascular disease, of major adverse cardiac events, of worsened lipid profiles and worsened blood sugar regulation and inflammation and increased body fat. It goes on and on. So we know that testosterone is a vitally important hormone, especially for men. And this is why a lot of men need to be paying attention to their testosterone. The next question is, what levels do we want? What's important? How should I check it, etc.? And there's some nuance here because a lot of men will go to their doctor and they'll get a testosterone level checked. And the problem with testosterone levels is the total testosterone level doesn't really tell the whole story. So what I mean by that is about 99% of our testosterone in our bloodstream is actually bound to proteins, these big fluffy molecules that make that testosterone ineffective. It's unavailable. Because it is bound to these big proteins, it can't get into the cell. It can't get into the brain cell, the muscle cell, etc. It can't do its job. It can't do anything. And so it's rendered useless. That brings up the concept of free testosterone. And free testosterone is the testosterone that's free floating in the bloodstream, just as it sounds, and it's able to get through the cell wall. It's able to bind to an androgen receptor. It's able to go to the nucleus of a cell and actually have a physiologic effect, helping you increase metabolism and focus and energy and build muscle and burn fat and have better sex and all that kind of good stuff. And so we want to be looking at free testosterone, not the total testosterone, because the total doesn't really tell the whole story.
And that's taken mainly, I'm assuming, through your labs, right? For people listening, like you just do a simple blood test and it'll draw.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, simple blood test. And I would emphasize that you need to be checking free testosterone, not total. And then the question comes up, well, what should my levels be? Where do I want to be? First of all, there are several longitudinal studies that look at this, and one here in the U.S., one in Sweden, and one in Finland. And these three studies were longitudinal studies over 20 to 30 years that simply followed men's testosterone levels. And what they found was a dramatic decline. We've seen a nearly 50% decline in free testosterone levels over the past few decades. 50%. What that means is pretty scary. That means that a 40-year-old guy today has a free testosterone level that's almost half of what it was 20 years ago, a 40-year-old guy then. It's crazy. And that's why I talk about this in my TED Talk. I talk about this in my book. It's really a men's health epidemic that we're suffering, and it's right under our nose. And testosterone levels are getting lower and lower every single year by about 1%. So then we go back to, well, where should my numbers be? Well, the problem is when you look at your lab slip, and whether this is looking at total testosterone or free testosterone, there's on the right side of the page, you'll see this reference range. Well, what is the reference range? It's not the optimal normal level. It's not where you want to be. It's not the ideal level. It's simply the average. It's the average. LabCorp does 1 billion testosterone levels this year, 1 billion free testosterone levels. And think of a bell curve, and they simply statistically look at the average of all those numbers, and that's the reference range. So put those two facts together that I just shared. One, we know testosterone levels are plummeting. Two, we know that the reference range is simply the average of the population, and that helps you understand why that reference range gets lower and lower and lower every year, and men are being told by their doctor, oh, well, you're in this reference range, so you're okay. Excuse my language, I got to call bullshit here. You're not okay. You're just falling into this average range. It's like they keep lowering the bar and lowering the bar. Oh, you're good. You look fine. When in fact, you're not. Short answer, you want a free testosterone level of 20. 20 picograms per milliliter. You want a free testosterone level of 20. And that may equate to a total of 800. It may equate to a total of 1,600. It depends on a lot of other factors. Those proteins I was talking about that bind to the testosterone and make it unavailable can affect that. So that's why you want to be looking at your free. And again, you want to be looking for a free of around 20. It's scary, Joe, because most of the guys who come into my practice, we check their level and it's 4. It's 6. And they've been told by their doctor, oh, you're in that range. You're okay. You don't qualify for testosterone. You don't need testosterone. Nonsense.
Yeah. Well, I was going to ask, because it's been so prevalent in recent years, do you feel that maybe we're testing more and that's how we're seeing things that we maybe, 20, 30 years ago, we weren't testing as much, or maybe we were, for you to dispel that. But, I was wondering if there was a drop in these levels just because we're testing more and more aware of it nowadays.
Yeah, without question, I believe the biggest culprit is actually toxins in our environment. So there's this concept of endocrine disruptors, which basically is a fancy term for chemicals or toxins in our environment that can turn off our normal hormone function. And that could be through blocking hormone production, blocking hormone function, many different mechanisms of action. But what we know is that there's an increased risk of low testosterone, of obesity, of hormone-related cancers, of ADHD, of autoimmune disease, of infertility, of allergic issues. It goes on and on and on. All of these issues that studies have clearly shown a relationship with toxins. Testosterone, for example, there are numerous studies which show how things like phthalates and BPA, these are chemicals that are used to make plastics. Okay, plastic water bottle, plastic Gatorade bottle, K-cups, plastic food containers. These plastics are leaching into our food, they're leaching into our water, and studies show a clear, direct correlation with low testosterone. We can look at our food and herbicides. Atrazine is a chemical sprayed on our crops. It kills bugs, kills weeds, and it's the second most commonly used herbicide secondary to glyphosate. And studies show that atrazines castrate animals at very microscopic levels in their drinking supply. And you test humans, there have been studies that look at this. Every single human you test, you'll see massively detectable levels of atrazine. One crazy study actually showed that they would feed frogs a small amount of atrazine, and it would turn male frogs into female frogs that can actually lay eggs and reproduce.
Wow.
From simple exposure to atrazine. We have birth control. Women's synthetic birth control is in our drinking water, and our municipal treatment plants can't filter it out. And so most of the drinking water that men are drinking is full of women's birth control. And what that's doing is it's acting like a glue, sticking to that androgen receptor, that hormone receptor, blocking normal testosterone function and blocking hormone production. It's pretty scary. And so that's food and water. And then you can look at things like personal care products, like our laundry detergent, our soap, our shampoo, our deodorant, our sunscreen. We're like bathing in this soup of endocrine disruption. So there are a lot of other causes, poor sleep, poor nutrition, lack of, sedentary lifestyle, lack of fitness, stress, etc. But without question, in my opinion, toxins are the main culprit that's crushing our hormone levels. And it's getting worse and worse every year. And yes, there's increased awareness about it, increased testing, but we're also seeing, I see men in their 20s and 30s every day that have near castrate levels of testosterone that just shouldn't be.
For people listening, low libido might be an obvious one. How about like other signs when people might suggest in them that the T levels are falling, or maybe just, a little low or very low?
Yeah. So a lot of guys will notice decreased energy, fatigue. They don't have the stamina to make it throughout the day. They don't have the stamina to have the same workout routine. They feel like they're struggling with recovery after workouts. They feel like they want to take a nap. Belly fat, they can't get rid of that belly fat, and they're working out in the gym, but nothing's working. Brain fog, lack of focus and mental acuity. They can't quite think as clearly as they used to. Lack of drive. I've heard stories of men who were chasing their wives around, and now the women are chasing the men around saying, hey, what's going on? Don't you want it anymore? And I even had a few cases where wives had thought that the man is cheating on them because they're no longer interested in sex. And so the sex component has a lot of different facets there. And so there are a lot of signs, but I'll tell you, Joe, most commonly I'll see guys who have no symptoms whatsoever. They'll think they're doing fine. I have buddies of mine. I'm golfing with them, and I'm like, you should check your level. Like, no, I'm good. A week later, holy crap, what do I do? It's 4. Oh, yeah, I'm not surprised. It's rampant. And most guys don't recognize the problem until it's very advanced, until it's too late, until they have really dramatic symptoms. This is why I recommend, as part of what I do is advanced diagnostic testing and find those blind spots early. Remember, low testosterone, direct link to increased risk of cardiovascular disease, major adverse cardiac events. You want to catch it sooner rather than later.
And you did mention you're seeing guys a lot younger. Is there a specific maybe like age range that men are affected most by this?
I spent 25 years as a board certified urologist in traditional medicine, traditional healthcare, seeing guys every day. And it used to be the 60-year-old guy come in and he's starting to notice some erectile dysfunction and low drive and feeling like he's getting older and things aren't right. So it used to be just those 60-year-old, 70-year-old guys. Now I swear I'm seeing it in guys in their 40s and 30s. It's becoming a younger man's problem because I mentioned that the endocrine disruptors, but what's scary is that there's also an epigenetic transgenerational effect. Big words there. What that means is studies have shown that you pass this to your offspring. Your grandfather was exposed to stuff in his environment. It affects his sperm, which gets passed down to his son, which gets passed down to you, and now you're passing it down to your son. And so we're seeing generation after generation worsening of this trend toward low testosterone, and there's a clear hereditary component of that as well.
Are there anything like physically you could be doing? Maybe it's lack of sleep, or some people say, if you don't use it, you lose it, like you said, when it comes to intimacy, things like that. Are there things that then unrelated to toxins we're exposed to that could be a direct impact?
Definitely. Yeah, a lot of other factors. So, stress is a big one. And I want to caution this section that most men listening are probably thinking, yeah, I don't have stress. I'm fine. It doesn't bother me. I'm able to overcome it. And I'll call BS on every guy because it's affecting you. You just don't realize it, or you think you're overcoming it, or you think you can deal with it. And we compensate, but it's still affecting our system. So when we think of stress, we're thinking about not just psychological stress, worried about finances or the kids or marital issues or your business. Stress can also be stress from poor sleep, whether it's intentional or unintentional, we could talk about. Stress can be from gut issues. I see so many men that have issues with, leaky gut syndrome, imbalance in the microbiome, which is the balance of bugs in your gut. Stress from poor diet, from too much sugar. Stress from sedentary lifestyle and injury. Or even I see stress from overtraining. I see a lot of high performers I work with, they're overtraining and they're training twice a day and it's too much. And you need balance. You need parasympathetic, sympathetic nervous system balance when it comes to this concept of stress. Any of these stressors can raise cortisol. Cortisol is our stress hormone that most people don't think much about, but it's a key hormone because what it does, it goes to the brain and it turns off production of testosterone. turns off production of thyroid hormone, turns off production of DHEA, another key hormone, turns off growth hormone, turns off a lot of other key hormones that we care about, all because of these stressors. And so when I work with guys, a lot of it is, understanding work-life balance, cleaning up the gut, working on proper nutrition, making sure that you're really being intentional about sleep and tracking it to make sure that you're getting good quality sleep. All of those factors, Joe, without question, can affect testosterone levels. Strength training is so important, especially, heavy lifting for testosterone levels, but be careful. A lot of guys out there tend to overdo it and can do too much.
How about maybe myths around testosterone?
Yeah, so one of the common myths that I perpetuated myself back in my urology days was that testosterone causes prostate cancer. Testosterone's like gasoline on the fire. If you take testosterone, it's going to cause prostate cancer. And we've now debunked that myth, and we have numerous studies that show that for the general population, when we correct testosterone by giving testosterone replacement therapy, it does not increase risk of prostate cancer, and it may in fact lower it, because we know men with low T have an increased risk of getting prostate cancer. So we know that testosterone doesn't cause prostate cancer. There have been a couple studies, the Finkel study and the vegan study, two studies that suggested that testosterone causes cardiovascular disease. We've now dispelled that myth and shown very clearly in dozens of studies the exact opposite, and those studies had major flaws to them. We now understand that testosterone does not cause cardiovascular disease. It in fact lowers your risk by about 30 to 50%, reduce incidence of a major adverse cardiac event. And so testosterone does not cause cardiovascular disease. It in fact helps it. There's also the myth that when you start taking testosterone, what that means is you're going to be on it forever. And it's going to turn off production, and now you're always going to be dependent on it. And so why would you ever take it? When your testosterone levels, your free testosterone levels 4, like I talked about, and you do strength training, and you work on stress, and you clean up the gut, you clean up your nutrition, and you get sleeping better, you get micronutrient supplementation, zinc and magnesium and B complex vitamins and boron, and all those other great things that can help testosterone. You may get that 4 up to 6, 7, 8. Great. You're nowhere close to 20 yet. And so the fact of the matter is that for the men that we work with, natural approaches, natural things that you can do to boost testosterone are great, incredibly important for a lot of other reasons as well. But they're typically not going to move the needle enough to get you up to 20 where you need to be. Therefore, those men need testosterone replacement therapy to get your levels where you need to be, because your body's not producing enough testosterone. So the myth around testosterone suppressing your own function, the only reason we give you testosterone is if your body is in fact not making enough as it is. And so I'm not worried about suppressing your function, because it already sucks to begin with. And that's the reason we're giving you testosterone. And that's really the big mindset shift that guys need to have, where the question when guys first start is, do I have to be on this forever? It very quickly becomes, Doc, can I be on this forever? Because once you appreciate the benefits of having optimized testosterone, you don't ever want to go to that crummy level that you're at before with a free T of 4.
Not like a statin where, you don't want to be on it forever, I guess, right?
Exactly. That's a whole other story.
Yeah. When you were mentioning, though, your sleep and gut and even supplements, like, are there any things you might recommend?
Great question. At Gapin Institute, my center in Sarasota, we do a lot of personalization to understand what guys need. And I use the phrase one size fails all the time, because what's right for one guy's wrong for the next. I love that you brought that up. And so the key is we do a lot of targeted supplementation, and there are some basics that I think every guy should have. I think there's fundamental evidence that every guy needs optimized vitamin D levels. And so most guys are deficient in vitamin D, so things like vitamin D. Studies show fish oil can be very beneficial. Studies have shown that things like B complex vitamins can be beneficial for men, especially if you're trying to optimize testosterone or you're trying to optimize fertility. Micronutrient support depends on testing, but things like zinc and magnesium might be things that guys are looking for when it comes to testosterone specifically. But a lot of the supplementation I recommend really centers around the individual and what the testing shows we need based on deficiencies, based on issues that we find. There are a lot of docs out there giving you their magic stack. Take this stack of supplements that I recommend for you. And I really prefer to look at each individual, and through advanced testing, through the blood labs, through functional gut testing, through cortisol testing and micronutrient testing, understand what you need. When it comes to diet, It's funny. Whenever I go on Reddit or Twitter, people are battling and fighting and arguing over keto and carnivore and paleo and Mediterranean and vegan and you name it. And they're all right and they're all wrong because, again, it depends on the individual and your genetics dictate a lot of this. Your gut dictates a lot of this. We do a lot of work with blood sugar tracking. So in my system, one of the things I talk about is using data to actually track outcomes and results. And one of the things that we look at is blood sugar monitors. A continuous glucose monitor, or CGM, is a great tool that you can use to actually measure blood sugar real time and see how your body's responding. So, for example, a lot of guys are, eating sushi and they think they're being super healthy. And well, put on a blood sugar monitor. You'll see your blood sugars going through the roof for 3 hours at a time, and that's not optimal if you're trying to burn fat and build muscle and optimize like most guys want. And so I rely on data to really drive those kind of decisions of what diet's right for you. In general, whatever diet you're on, the key is going to be macronutrient ratios, carbs, proteins, and fat, and the balance between those. Calories are not created equal. Yes, we want to look at your total caloric intake, and we use a lot of metabolic testing to understand exactly how many calories your body needs to maintain weight and maintain fat and muscle or burn or gain. But once you know that, you also need to know macro ratios. And what I mean by this is most guys eat way too many carbs and not enough protein. When you start to track, again, going back to data, if you can track your intake, and there are free apps like Chronometer and MyFitnessPal on your phone that are free, you can track your intake, and most guys will find, holy cow, I'm eating way too many carbs, not enough protein, and that puts you in the wrong physiologic state. And so, general recommendation for every guy is you need to be eating about 0.8 to 1 gram of protein for every pound of body weight. 0.8 to 1. If your ideal body weight is 160 pounds, that means you need to be eating anywhere from about 130 to 160 grams of protein a day. And most guys are probably eating 40, 50, nowhere close. So just by doing that alone, you're suddenly going to drop your calorie intake, you're going to drop your carb intake, and it's going to help you really shift your metabolism. A lot of stuff like that. And then we could spend an hour talking about sleep as well.
Sleep is great to touch on just because some people hear, okay, as long as you get 7, sometimes 8. What is your, recommendation?
In general, the quantity of sleep is not as important as quality. So everyone's focused on 7, 7.5, 8, like you said, and people say you need 8 hours of sleep. Well, that's not true. Genetics dictates. Some people can do fine with 6.5 or 7. Some people need 8, so it depends. In general, I would aim for 7 to 7.5 hours of sleep. But the key is you want to be tracking sleep to see the quality. And what I mean by that is we have different stages of sleep. You have REM sleep and non-REM sleep. And non-REM sleep is broken down into light sleep and deep sleep, and there's different stages. But what we want to be looking at is the deep sleep and the REM sleep. And the time spent in those two particular stages is what really defines the quality of your sleep, because those are the times where you have memory consolidation, you have repair, you have recovery, of remodeling. Your body heals itself and you recover during that time. I like to point out that I have a lot of guys who are big into training. And, strength training is so incredibly important, and they're in the gym all the time and they're not seeing the gains. But I want to emphasize, when you go to the gym and you lift weights, you're not building muscle. Make no mistake about it, training, lifting weight does not build muscle. You're actually tearing muscle down so that when you repair and rebuild and recover, you could be bigger, hypertrophy, build more muscle, build bigger muscles. That happens while you're sleeping. And so if you're not getting that good quality deep sleep especially, you're missing out on that key stage of sleep and key stage of recovery. Growth hormone surges while you're sleeping, especially in that deep sleep the first couple hours of the night. And so use a wearable to track it. I typically use the Aura Ring. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of other devices out there. I'm agnostic to device, but I will say Aura has validated studies that show they're as close to sleep study data as you can get. So they're pretty good. Nothing's perfect though, and I would really follow trends over time, and I wouldn't trust it to the exact minute. They're close, but they're not necessarily 1,000% accurate. So track your data, and the key thing to look at is you want 1 hour of deep sleep. So 60 minutes of deep sleep is really the key stage to be looking for, and that will tend to happen in the first half of the evening. And then you want 2 hours of REM sleep, which tends to happen in the second half of the evening. So 60 minutes and 120 minutes deep in REM. So that's really what we want to be looking for. Guys ask, well, what can I do to improve my sleep? And there's the intentional component and the unintentional. So the intentional is you stay up late, you're working on a project, you're still busy, you're binging on Netflix, and it's midnight. You got to be up at 5:30. Like you set yourself up to fail. There's no way you're going to get in the quantity or the quality of sleep that you need. So it starts with being intentional by simply counting backwards from when you have to wake up, and you have to be asleep by 7.5 hours prior, which means you probably got to get it into bed around 8 hours prior to be sure that you're preparing yourself for that. So that's simple. And then some strategies that you can think of before you go to bed. There are 5 things I like to point out are great things that you can do to kind of get you into that sleep mode. One is reading, and it has to be a actual physical book, not an actual tablet or device. You can journal. I love using that nighttime for journaling. You can meditate, whether it's doing it on your own or with guided apps if you need it. You can do sauna. Sauna is great for turning your body down and getting you into that relaxed phase. Not cryo. Cryo is the exact opposite. It's kind of stimulant. You don't want to do cryo before bed. Sauna is great. And then the 5th one is sex. Nothing gets you better tuned for sleep than sex. I wouldn't do all 5 of those at the same time. I'd pick and choose, obviously, because that'd be a little awkward. But suffice it to say that those are great things that you can do before sleep. When it comes to supplementation, a lot of guys ask, I like things like magnesium. It has to be glycinate or threonate. Those are the only 2 that will get through the blood-brain barrier and hit the brain. So glycinate or threonate are great. 5-HTP is good. GABA is good in terms of supplementation. L-theanine, sometimes ashwagandha. These are all good supplements that we may try depending on the individual. Melatonin typically is not the answer. Most people ask about that, and that does not tend to be the answer for helping you with sleep. So that's all on the intentional side, things that you can do to help improve sleep. And then there's the unintentional, where I hear this every day. Guys say, I went to bed at 11, just fine, fell asleep quickly, no problem at all. And at 2 o'clock, I woke up and I'm up. I can't sleep. My mind's racing. I'm thinking about yesterday, what I should have did, what I should have said. I'm thinking about tomorrow, what I got to do. And I can't sleep. And it's an hour later before they fall back asleep. That is all cortisol. I talked earlier about stress and how it raises your cortisol, your stress hormone. That's how it presents itself. So any guy who's waking up like that, then you may have to go pee and there's nothing in there, a little bit in there, but that's not what woke you up. It's the cortisol, and it's after that second sleep cycle where you pop awake, your head comes above the surface of the water, and you can't get back down again, and that's all cortisol. So working on ways to reduce all the stressors we talked about would be the answer in that situation.
Wow, yeah, and I wanted, because we did say, testosterone replacement therapy, TRT, a couple of times. Would you mind just breaking down a basic general understanding of what that is for people listening so they understand, and how it's sort of administered?
Yeah, great question. So we talked about how men are having an epidemic level of low testosterone, and so let's say we've done the natural approach. We've done that for a while, and their levels are now still low enough that they need replacement therapy. There are a couple ways of doing that. First of all, there are medications that we can give to stimulate your own body to produce more testosterone. Medications like Clomid or HCG. There are some peptides that are great for testosterone production as well. But let's put those aside. Let's assume we're talking specifically about giving testosterone replacement. There are, in general, 3 ways of doing it. One is injectable, one is topical, and one is pellets. And I tend to recommend them in that order. Okay, so first is injectable. What that means is that men will take a small needle, and it's an insulin needle. It's like a 28, 30 gauge, tiny little needle. You can barely feel it. And you'll go just under the skin, and you'll inject it subcutaneously under the skin either twice a week or 3 times a week. I typically like twice a week. That's kind of the sweet spot. Ideally, guys could benefit from having it every day, but that's pretty tough, pretty intense. Compliance drops dramatically. Guys are going to be like, screw this, I can't do this. Once a week is not frequently enough, because you have a lot of peaks and valleys and you have inconsistencies in levels. And so you want to be doing it at least twice a week, where you instead of having the ups and downs and the peaks and valleys, you have more of a steady state where there's very little fluctuation in your levels. And so twice a week subcutaneous injections. You can do intramuscular injections as well, where you have your wife injecting your buttock, or you can do it yourself in your quad muscle and your thigh and go deep into the muscle. I just personally don't like that because it's a little more painful, more sensitive. There are about 1 to 2% of men, however, with the sub-Q, they don't get the same levels as the intramuscular injection, and so those men we have to convert to intramuscular if we're going to stay with injections. So that's injectable. Again, twice a week, maybe 3 times a week. Painless, tiny needle, subcutaneous injection, and it works great. The second treatment choice is topical. And there are a lot of pharmaceutical-based gels that you put, alcohol-based gels you put in your shoulder or chest or upper arm, and those never get your levels up to where you need them to be. And so I abandoned those probably 20 years ago now. I use compounded testosterone, and it comes in a Versa-based cream, so it's a small cream with an applicator, and it has a pump. And you put a few pumps on your hand, and you put it on the scrotum. And the reason we use the scrotum is the absorption through the scrotal wall is incredibly better than anywhere else in your body. And so we can use a dime-shaped amount of testosterone cream to get your levels where you need them to be. And so it's a great non-invasive approach. The downside to it is you got to do it every single day, every single morning. And the reason is the half-life is so short, meaning your body metabolizes it so quickly when you use topical that by the next morning it's already gone. And so most men, you take a shower, you put it on then, and then by the next morning you're putting it back on again. So that's the second option. The third option is pellets, and I typically reserve this as a last resort. What this involves is a guy will come into the office, he'll lay on his belly, and we'll make a small little puncture in his lower back or buttock, and we'll numb it up first so he doesn't really feel it. And we'll put a bunch of little dissolvable pellets, and we may put anywhere from 12 to 18 pellets depending on how many the guy needs. And those pellets will, over time, dissolve and get absorbed into the body, and it's a nice long-term approach where it'll last maybe 4 months at a time. Sounds attractive for guys who are traveling, who don't want to deal with it every day, kind of thing. Or twice a week injections. It's a nice appealing option. The problem with it is that the absorption can vary dramatically, where a guy can get 15 pellets today and a 15 pellet again in 4 months from now, and the levels that you get are quite different. And so there's a time and place for it for pellets, and for some guys it's great, but in general I consider that the third best option of the three.
We mentioned a lot of natural approaches. The TRT versus the natural, what is that exactly doing in terms of someone who says, okay, I want to try the natural way first? How are you telling them, look, we tried these natural remedies or approaches. Okay, here's why we need to take it up to this level?
Yeah, great question. And what I find is when I work with guys, they're already motivated to get help. They're struggling already. They have low energy, fatigue, brain fog. They can't burn fat. They're frustrated because everything they've done has failed. And they've tried the natural approaches and didn't work. But I always suggest that, the lifestyle component is such a massive piece, and I always start there. But what we find is, let's say a guy wants to try to just aggressively do lifestyle maneuvers. We'll come back 3 months later, and his testosterone free T is still 5 or 6. And I'll just say, hey, Joe, where do you want your levels to be? Do you want to stay where you are here like this, or do you want to get this corrected so we can deal with other things? And, we spent a lot of time today talking about testosterone, but I want to emphasize that there are 50 hormones in our body we got to be looking at. 50 hormones that matter when it comes to energy and focus and metabolism and sexual function and longevity. And we got to be looking at a lot more than just testosterone. There's cardiovascular health, there's gut health, there's obviously sleep, and there's nutrition to focus on, and the mindset piece and stress, and all these other components and facets that we got to be looking at. And then talking about layering in peptides on top of all that. Testosterone is one piece of that macrocosm that we're talking about, this male human operating system. And so a lot of times it's, you can keep messing around with lifestyle stuff for 6, 9, 12 months, but eventually it's time to move on to the other stuff. Most guys realize that, and I don't tend to get much resistance from them. They want to feel better, they want to be better, and that's just one piece of getting them there.
Yeah. Oh, well, how about side effects for people who are considering this?
Side effects are better energy, better focus, better
The
food,
positive.
better tablet, all that kind of good stuff. Yeah. So
Right.
in general, that there are negligible side effects. You can have things like increase in red blood cells, production by your bone marrow. And so for most men on testosterone, we recommend you donate blood maybe once or twice a quarter, once or twice a year, maybe once a quarter at the most. And so that's the biggest thing that we tend to find. Some men may get swelling in their legs, very, very rarely. Some men will have a bump in their estrogen levels. So testosterone, as it gets metabolized or broken down, it gets converted into estrogen. Some men on testosterone can have high estrogen, which that can cause symptoms such as breast sensitivity, breast enlargement, moodiness, crying, stuff like that. And there are ways that we can mitigate that and overcome the estrogen issue if that happens. Again, not very common. But that's about it. The other one other myth, I guess we can go back to that point, is
Sure.
the myth that it causes rage and it causes
Mm.
aggressive behavior, and that's nonsense. Not at all. It doesn't cause anything like that. It causes us a state of improved mood, improved quality of well-being and state of mind and drive. It does not cause aggressiveness or anger or rage or anything like that.
Yeah, and does it vary treatment like duration depending on if it's topical versus injection?
Yeah, it probably depends more on the level. And I
Okay.
want to clarify that we're trying to help you be a man. We're not trying to make you Superman. And you look at bodybuilders out there, and again, let's say we're trying to get a free testosterone level of 20, like I mentioned. To put into perspective, a bodybuilder, guys who are doing high levels of nandrolone and testosterone, all these other steroid hormones to build for performance competitions, their free T level may be 200. I'm talking about a free T
It's
level of 20. And so
yeah,
we're talking about just different logarithmic scales of numbers here. And so
10%.
that's where you
Yeah.
start to have all kinds of wacky stuff happening and you're changing physiology and you're messing with stuff that I don't think you should be messing with. Honestly, that's a different scale. I'm trying to get you back to optimize where you should be so that I use the phrase be your absolute best again. Most guys just I want to feel great again. I want to feel like I did when I was 25, and I want to have the energy and the focus and the drive and have great sex and have a great body and enjoy life again. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. No, 100%. How about like you mentioned tech, you have the ring. Are there any other sort of emerging technologies or approaches or the future of doing what you do that is exciting for you to see?
Yeah. Yeah, the blood sugar tracking is a real key for us to help guys understand how not just nutrition, but poor sleep and stress can affect their blood sugar levels and what they can do about it. Sometimes it's the food they're eating, sometimes it's the order of the food they're eating that can matter. Sometimes when you wake up with a fasting blood sugar of 105, and it should be like 90 or less, and you haven't eaten anything in 12 hours, something's wrong. Like, why would your blood sugar be so high if you haven't eaten? And the answer, again, goes back to cortisol, goes back to stress. And so, blood sugar tracking is huge. We do a lot of work tracking heart rate variability, or HRV. And HRV is a metric that really helps us measure the balance between your nervous system components, the sympathetic and nervous system components. And we want to be parasympathetic dominant. Sympathetic means like stress, fight or flight. Parasympathetic is rest and recovery. We want to be parasympathetic dominant. And you can measure that directly with heart variability. And so there are different devices that do that. There's the Polar H10 strap that we've been using for many years now. There are a lot of rings and devices on your arms and fingers, and I would suggest that if you're tracking HRV, all of those are mediocre at best when it comes to tracking. You really want a body strap, and so the Polar H10 is great. We recently, in the last year, have switched to Morpheus. Morpheus is another HRV strap, and what it does is it measures your heart rate variability, but it also helps you understand your based on training zones where you should be and recovery status based on your training zones as well. Again, this goes back to there are a lot of causes of stress. One of them may be overtraining, and it helps you see that, helps you understand that, and so I love devices like that are added tools to help understand what you're doing right and where you might need some additional support.
Cool. And for people listening, obviously you've dispelled so much, information, knowledge, expertise. Someone who wants to find more about what you do, your work, your institute, how can they get in touch with you?
Our website's gapininstitute.com, and we have a special page that I've created for the listeners. It's gapininstitute.com. That's GAPIN institute.com /launch. LAUNCH launch. On that page, I have shared for your listeners a free copy of my masterclass that I recorded, a free copy of my TED Talk I gave on the men's health epidemic along with the transcript, a free copy of my best-selling book, Male 2.0, a digital copy of that, a copy of my High Performance Health Handbook, which includes 15 strategies and tactics that you can start using today to have more energy, burn fat, have better sex, and live longer. All those are free. And there'll also be a link there if you want to reach out to my team and see how we can help you. You can get on a free call with my team. We have a launch day, which is an amazing, advanced, comprehensive executive exam. You know, our most valuable asset, our most valuable commodity by far is time. And guys don't have a lot of time to spend on this stuff. And so I say, give me a day. Come to Sarasota. We wine and dine you. We put you in a hotel. We feed you breakfast and lunch, and we do every test you can imagine, all the blood tests and saliva, and you do the stool testing at home. That'd be awkward. You do the genetics. You do the imaging. You do the body comp. You do the fitness. You do the metabolic testing, physical exam. You meet with the coach. You do it all in one freaking day. You fly home. A couple weeks later, we get all the results, put them together for you in a nice deliverable, and we help you understand what are your core issues, what are the blind spots that are holding you back that you don't even realize are getting in the way of your performance. And then we could talk to you about what it looks like to work with us long term. And we have a year-long program called Peak Launch, where we can take all that information we've learned, all those issues that need to be addressed, and work with you on the medical side, on the lifestyle, on the coaching, the accountability, the nutrition, hormones, peptides, you name it. We put it all together into our Peak Launch program. So again, that's gapininstitute.com/launch, and you'll get all that free stuff, and reach out to my team if you need it.
Yeah, I'll make sure all those are in the show notes. But thank you so much for taking the time today, Dr. Tracy Gapin. Thank you so much.
You got it.